What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides video. I'm Kangas, and today I'm discussing our Challenger Coach's counter picks to some of the more popular and OP champions on patch 11.9. We're going to cover the runes, builds, and playstyles to effectively counter specific matchups. So next time you run into one of these characters, you'll have the game knowledge and the confidence to bully your opponents. Now hit that sub button and let's hop right into it.
Starting things off in the top lane, we have a much needed counter to DARIUS in the form of Nocturne. Nocturne has always been a jungle champion with a strong off-meta role as a mid laner, but recently he's emerged as a top lane pick here and there, with so much success that he's even been played at the pro level in the role. Nocturne is just sort of a strong laner in general, thanks to the crazy pushing power from his Q and passive, on top of the sustain from the passive as well. Basically, no champ can match his pushing power, and if you walk up to contest him on the wave, that means fighting him while he's buffed by his Dusk Trail. But there are plenty of strong champs top lane. Camille, Riven, and Garen all come to mind. But all of them have one thing in common, and that's that they struggle to deal with Darius, and often need jungle help to win. So what makes Nocturne so good against him? Well, Nocturne has two distinct advantages in this matchup. First up, Nocturne's W is a huge asset in duels against Darius. Darius's Q is very telegraphed, with the windup giving you plenty of time to react with your spell shield to block it, with that being especially useful when it's the outer blade that you're negating. Later on, you can also use your W to block his ult. The second advantage is that you have the ability to disengage Darius. If you misplay by getting caught with your W on cooldown, you can always use your E to fear him back and reset the lane. But hopefully you don't end up as the one retreating in this matchup, since you want to be the one going aggro on Darius, but it is nice to have a defensive ability to fall back on when things go bad. For items, you want to start off with Corrupting Potion, then build into Stride Breaker, Plated Steel Caps, and Executioner's Calling. After this, go for a Sterix Gauge, Guardian's Angel, upgrade Executioners to Chempunk Chainsword, and round things out with a Randuin's Omen. This build gives you a lot of solid team fighting, allowing you to be the first into a fight and also survive the enemy team's damage. If you want a more aggressive option, either for side laning against Darius or just to be more of a threat in fights, you can consider grabbing Blade of the Rune King and Death's Dance over Guardian Angel and Randuin's. If you regularly watch this series, you know that we do the best we can to give you the best counters to all the super meta picks, like Darius, who appears in this video pretty much every single patch. But what about the less common picks? Maybe there's a champ that isn't necessarily the most meta or even that OP, but for one reason or another, you can just never beat them. Well, that brings us to today's question of the day. What champ is your mental counter? Whether it's a tilting playstyle, a skill shot that you just cannot seem to dodge, or any reason at all, really. We just want to know what champ you dread seeing in Champ Select. For me personally, it's Twitch, just because as soon as he goes invisible, I forget that he exists. But let me know yours in the comments down below. Now, back to the video. Our second top lane counter is Vladimir into URGOT. This isn't a hard lane counter where you're bullying the URGOT. Instead, it's just a pick that gives you a safe place to farm with Vlad, with your objective being to outscale him and then being a monstrous carry in fights. Basically, you'll play this pretty much like any other Vlad lane, with your early goal being to avoid fighting, aiming to last hit minions you safely can, and then conceding the ones that you can't. Since URGOT is forced to eventually push in due to his AoE damage from the shotgun knees, you can wait out for the wave to come closer to your tower. Just be sure that you're not giving up too much farm this way. When URGOT tries to engage on you, you just dodge his E with your W. The long cast time and somewhat slow charge makes it pretty easy to reactively do this. Once you have your Q at max rank and you have a bit of CDR, you'll be able to trade way more aggressively on the URGOT, but still keep the trades brief. Ideally, you'll land a charged up E and empowered Q, and then run away, relying on whittling him down over time rather than bursting. Even with Vlad's insanely strong scaling, you will not be able to face tank URGOT and win a 1v1. You need to kite him using Phase Rush and your W to dodge his E and ult to win fights. But that's all in a hypothetical 1v1 situation. Referencing back to what I said before, the point of this pick isn't to win 1v1 against URGOT in the first place. Your goal is to reach team fights, where you can have a much bigger impact than the sluggish Juggernaut. Now for the build, you start off with Dark Seal, then rush Sork Shoes. The movement speed from tier 2 boots helps a lot in this lane, trust me. Build into Night Harvester next, Cosmic Drive, Rabadons, Void Staff, and Zonias. As in all Vlad matchups, if you need the Zonias early based on the enemy comp, feel free to pick it up once you think it's right. Now let's move on to some of the jungle counters, but first a quick disclaimer, jungle can be largely influenced by lane priority, so this video is of course assuming that neither laners are budging from their lanes to come and decide the fight. The first of these jungle matchups is Zac into ELISE. Now before we get into this, you have to note that you are never going to fight ELISE 1v1 as Zac. Her percent-based damage lets her melt you, and the healing she gets from attacking in Spider form pretty much outheals any damage that you do. This pick is not based on how you do as a fighter against her, but more how you can influence the game for your team. But early on, you'll be outclassed in that department too. Her high burst damage, stun, and ability to go untargetable make her the best early game jungler in the game. So if you can't fight her or outgank, why is this exactly a good matchup? Well, first of all, no champ beats Elise early. The only way Elise really loses out early is by bad pathing, taking bad fights, or just not being proactive with ganks in general. So with that said, she will basically trash any other early game jungler. So this leaves you trying to pick more scaling champs. But a good Elise player will aim to snowball hard and fast and look to shut out the game before the other team even really gets to play. The reason other champs never really outscale Elise is because almost all the other junglers are gated by their ult cooldowns. Think about it, when you say scaling, you imagine champs with huge impactful ults like Karthus, Amumu, Skarner, Nocturne, the list goes on. But all those champs are pretty much useless without their ults, which means there's a massive window of downtime. Basically, Elise can gank 5+ times between each time that her opposing jungler ults. But with Zac, you're able to scale much faster. Instead of being ult reliant, Zac is able to look for ganks and force fights with just his E. It's just that you need some points in the ability for the extra range to really start affecting the map. So with that in mind, you'll look to power farm early, aiming to build up levels. Zac's early damage is pretty pitiful, so don't look to 2v2 or 3v3 unless you're counter ganking for a very strong laner that can turn the fight. Once you max out your E though, you'll be able to constantly gank, helping your team recover from Elise's early pressure before they completely crumble. Once everything is stabilized, you'll be much more impactful in team fights, which Elise struggles with quite badly. Now for your items, you want to start off with Hailblade and then build into Sunfire Cape, Merc Treads, and Spear Visage. If you're doing well at this point and want to do a bit more of damage, you can also go Demonic Embrace, something I highly encourage. It's really fun. After that, pick up your Warmogs and Thornmail. But if you're the super serious, no fun type of player that wants to be as tanky as possible and do way less damage, you can skip Demonic Embrace and make your 6th item either Randuin's Omen or Force of Nature. And our second counter in the jungle is Xin Zhao into Fiddlesticks. You'll win this by taking fights straight to Fiddle, looking to kill him quick and keep him out of the game while also putting pressure on his laners. You'll start as early as you can, even looking for level 2 ganks if it seems possible. Simply take red and target lanes that seem like easy pickings. This is especially doable when you're ganking for laners that have either CC like Annie or TF mid, or when you target an immobile champion in top or bottom, where the longer lane makes it really hard for them to get back to the safety of their tower. After your initial gank, you'll want to keep farming pretty minimal. I mean, take your buffs and clear a few camps in between aggressive plays, but don't consistently full clear. When possible, look to take the fight to Fiddle himself. While Fiddle is a pretty capable duelist against champs that sit in his drain range, able to 1v1 most others, Xin is practically built to beat him down. Xin is a classic duelist in League, one of the first champions made to be able to specifically take champs on in a 1v1 setting. In most cases, when Fiddle's in a bad spot, he can just fear an opponent and run away. But with Xin, he won't get very far. After the fear wears off, if you can land your W, you'll be able to charge right back into him, forcing him to fight you. Once you do that, your Q allows you to interrupt his drain, putting it in a much longer cooldown than if he had finished the channel normally. And on top of that sticking power and ability to stop Fiddle's drain, Xin also does a ton of damage, as both upfront burst and high DPS over time, making it really easy to bring Fiddle down. As the game goes on, you'll want to continue looking to 1v1 the Fiddle anytime you can. With all of Xin's healing and damage, you can even take him on if he lands his ult on you first. For your items, you want to start off with Ember Knife and then build into Eclipse, Merc Treads, and Blade of the Ruin King. Your next 2 items will be Steric's Gauge and Guardian's Angel, with your last item being either Spear Visage or Randuin's Omen. If you want to specifically build for fighting Fiddle, or if the enemy team is super AP heavy as a whole, you can also go for a Wit's End after the Blade of the Ruin King. Fiddle is an insanely strong jungle pick and can easily turn the flow of a game with a single big ult. It can be really frustrating to shut him down early, only for the ending scoreboard to make it seem like he hard carried the team while your team blames you for jungle diff. To keep that from happening requires you exerting a lot of pressure, playing with a high tempo to keep him and his team out of the game. To do this, you'll need to gank the right lanes at the right times, and knowing when you can take the fight to Fiddle himself in his own jungle as well. And pathing is a very broad subject with a lot of variables that affect it. Figuring out how to adjust for each game can be overwhelming, but I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be. You can check out ProGuides.com, talk to one of our coaches, and they'll break down everything you need to know about jungle pathing so that you can out-jungle those Fiddlesticks, or really anybody. So head over and book your session now. You can climb the ladder right away. Now moving on to our mid lane matchups, our first pick is going to be another Vladimir as a counter into Katarina this time. Now we already had Vladimir early in this video as a counter to URGOT, but he's just such a good pick into both of these champs that we had to include him again. One thing to note is that the way you play the matchup is completely different. Against URGOT, you bring Phase Rush to kite him and play defensively, farming up and scaling to fight. Against Kat, you have a lot more fighting power. Instead of kiting, you're able to match her trading, answering her cues with your own, doing comparable damage but also healing up the damage that you take from her in the process. If she goes in for a more committed fight, well, you just pool all of her damage, which is especially useful once she has her ult. Just note that even if you win the trades that do happen, you don't have any way to force them yourself, so if you're walking all the way up past the minions to harass Cat, you'll be taking a lot of minion damage, as well as leaving yourself open to jungle ganks. If you're too far up, even your W won't bail you out of trouble. So if Cat concedes a lane, just accept the farm. A winning lane for a champ with insane scaling is basically a guaranteed win as long as you use your lead correctly. Diana's oppressive laning can feel almost impossible to deal with. She has strong wave clear, can shield to block poke, and wins both bursts and extended fights against anyone that tries to contest her. Well, almost anybody. Garen is the go-to off-meta pick that will allow you to effortlessly smash any assassin, and Diana is no exception. You'll use your QE combo to punish Diana anytime she moves up to farm. This basic combo does a lot of damage, easily out-damaging any return damage that she tries to put back into you. Oh, and especially when your W's active is available. On top of that, Garen also has really strong pushing power so that you can shove in waves and roam to help your jungler, or even look to gank side lanes if they're overextending. If you have vision control, Diana is never able to follow your roams, because all she knows, you could be sitting in a brush in the river waiting for her to face check you, which, I mean, that's also a move. And once you're out of laning phase, there's also never a point that Diana outscales you. In the side lane, you'll continue to strike her down at all stages of the game. She may have the potential to do huge AoE damage in teamfights, but your job will be to stick to her with your Q's silence, preventing her from ever dashing into your backline. For items, you want to start off with Doran's Blade, then build into Stridebreaker, Berserker's Greaves, and Stormrazor. After that, you want Deadman's Plate, then Steric's Gauge, and Force of Nature. If you want that added insurance of Force of Nature's magic resist earlier on, you can also buy it before Deadman's Plate, but you will be missing out on that movement speed that helps you get onto targets. Moving things down to the bot lane, we have another disclaimer. Of course, bot lane carries are heavily influenced by supports, and you won't just be running at each other to fight in a 1v1. These counters are more about how you win small trades and all-ins bot lane, assuming there isn't an overwhelming amount of support difference on either side. So our first pick in this lane is Ashe as an answer to Vayne. This is one of those matchups where you have the upper hand, but it's not as simple as you looking to just go for the throat right off the bat. Vayne is a strong duelist, even in the early levels, and can easily win all-in fights if you two just go at it. Instead, you use your higher range to consistently punish her, going for autos every time that she tries to secure any CS. Use W to poke her anytime it's off cooldown, with the extra shots from it helping to shove the wave in too, forcing Vayne to play from under her tower. The idea is to constantly poke away at her, without ever allowing her to proc silver bolts and press the attack. The second she's done that, you've probably lost the trade. Once you're level 6 though, you have a lot more pressure on Vayne. While it's true that she can tumble out of the way of your arrow, you won't be firing it off at random. Instead, you just sit on it. As long as you have your ult up, Vayne can never tumble forward to try and trade back at you. The second she does, you just ult her in the face, and then your support should be able to follow up and net you the kill. Basically, the way this matchup goes is that Vayne can rarely get into range to trade, and in the event that she does, she should die for it. Outside of lane, your plan should be to stay grouped and try to be more useful than Vayne. She certainly beats you in 1v1 situations in the side lane, but she can't match the utility from your ult's engage and the slows that you put out in a fight. In fact, while Vayne may hypercarry DPS, Ashe isn't actually too far behind, and with the advantage of having higher range, Ashe has more opportunity to put out that damage in teamfights. For items, you want to start off with Doran's Blade and then build into Berserker's Greaves, Kraken Slayer, and Phantom Dancer. If the opposing team has 3 or more melee or very short-range champions, you can go Runaan's Hurricane instead of Phantom Dancer. After that, build into Infinity Edge, Bloodthirster, and Lord Dominic's Regards. As with most marksmen, you can swap out BT for a situational item like Mercurial Scimitar or Mortal Reminder. And our other bot lane counter is Yasuo as an answer to Jhin. And just as a quick disclaimer, if you don't know how to play Yasuo, I take no responsibility for you losing your games and your teammates can't flame me. You may want to practice him in some normals before locking him in just for the sake of winning this lane. Anyway though, Yasuo is a pain for any AD carry to deal with. Even if they punish his weak early game, he just scales up and eventually reaches the point where he can crush them. But Yasuo is especially hard for Jhin to deal with. His telegraphed 4th auto, Q, and W are all crucial trading abilities for Jhin, and are also all easily blocked with Windwall. On top of that, even though he's a lane bully, Jhin doesn't just go for all ins like Lucian or Draven. He has a hit and run playstyle, preferring to trade around his 4th auto and Q before running back as he reloads. But against Yasuo, this style does not work. You can just dash through the minions and force extended fights against Jhin anytime that there's a wave. If you can get on him this way, there's not much a Jhin can do. And on top of you having a good lane phase against Jhin, you also provide more from a macro sense for your team. Yasuo is of course an amazing team fighter when you have a wombo combo team comp, but he's also an incredible side laner, able to duel almost any champion that dares to fight him in a 1v1 situation. This ability to be a split push menace just opens up way more options for your team than a Jhin can hope to match. Now for items, you want to start off with a Doran's Blade and then rush into Berserker's Greaves before building into your Immortal Shield Bow and Infinity Edge. After that, build a Bloodthirster, then Death Stance and Guardian Angel. But if the enemy team has lots of CC, you can also swap out Death Stance for a Mercurial Scimitar. When you're dealing with multiple tanks, you can also trade out BT for Blade of the Ruin King and Guardian Angel for Lord Dominic's Regards. Now let's take a look at supports, and of course, again, disclaimer, just like the bots before them, supports aren't wildly running at each other and fighting a 1v1. This is more about how your kit counters what the other support is trying to do, how to win trades, and just otherwise be more useful than them to your team. So the first of these support matchups is Galio into Thresh. This is not a hard counter matchup where you're looking to constantly use Galio's kit to force fights onto the Thresh or his carry. Galio's E is way too telegraphed, and any half-decent Thresh will easily be able to cancel it with their Flay, leaving you open to take a ton of damage. That said, if either Thresh or his carry get too disrespectful and overstep, you can trade with them by leading with taunt and chain your E before it wears off, but that of course requires them to make a mistake. More often than not, you'll be playing this lane pretty reactively. If Thresh lands a Q on you, it doesn't really accomplish much. It won't break your W's passive shield, and if he chooses to hook into you, you just land a full charge taunt and follow up with your E, Q, and passive auto. This combo does a ton of damage even early game, and with your AD carry following up, that should be an easy kill. You should be playing as a meat shield for your AD carry to prevent Thresh from ever hooking them. But on the off chance that he does hit a hook on them, just sit on your carry, going for a full taunt on Thresh. If his Lantern has been thrown out for his carry to follow up, keep holding your taunt as long as you can to deter them from clicking it. This buys much needed time for your AD carry to get back to safety. Outside of lane phase, you'll use your ults to completely shut down any engage attempts that Thresh makes. Since he lacks the reliable engage ults that champs like Leona and Nautilus have, Thresh has to commit a lot more when he's the one that starts fights, whether he's taking a hook onto a target or flashing into Flay and ult to carry. Regardless of how he chooses to start a fight, if you ult the champion that he is going for the second that he commits, you are condemning him to a very lonely death. The giant AoE from your ult will easily deter any of his allies from following up, leaving Thresh to die alone to you and your team. For items, you want to start off with Relic Shield, and then pick up Merc Treads and build into either Shurelya's or Solari, whichever mythic makes the most sense based on both comps. After that, go for Zhonya's, Knight's Vow, and Vigilant Wardstone. If you feel the need to be tankier as a frontline, or just value the utility of these alternatives more, you can also swap out Knight's Vow for Stoneplate, Thornmail, or Abyssal Mask. And finishing off our list, you know I couldn't be on a video without talking about Bard. We have him as a counter into Lulu. To understand why this pick is good, we have to first understand what makes Lulu so strong. Lulu is OP because she buffs her carry better than any other enchanter can, all while being able to peel against divers. So basically, she's God mode in both offense and defense as an enchanter. So you can't truly out-support Lulu, but with Bard, you'll use his kit to bypass her strengths and make opportunities for your team to win the game. In lane, Lulu has some pretty strong trading in extended fights, to the point that she can even turn 2v2s against some of the more aggressive kill lanes when paired with a high damage AD carry. This makes it really hard for engaged supports to go in, but with Bard, you don't ever have to put yourself in harm's way. You'll be fishing for Q stuns and following up with a meep-empowered autos when you land them. This short and bursty trade pattern leaves Lulu and her AD carry with very little chances to trade back. Aside from 2v2s, you'll also look to roam and affect the rest of the map, tipping the scales elsewhere to make your team overall stronger. Outside of lane phase, you're never going to be more useful than Lulu in a straight up 5v5, but that's the thing about Bard. You don't have to fight fair fights. You can help enable your team in different ways, using your portal and ult to find different opportunities to fight with a numbers advantage. Basically, Bard's usefulness is limited by your creativity and playmaking skill, while Lulu spams buttons on a single carry in the hopes that they mow your team down. But instead, you can completely skip the team fight and look for a surprise gank on a side laner. No one really expects a support gank on a split pusher 35 minutes into the game, when everyone else is grouping up around a dragon. But that's exactly why it works so well, and Bard's mobility allows him to do it very effectively. A surprise play like this can net an inhibitor for your team and blow the game wide open. Now for your items, a Relic Shield is an option, but you should be playing to trade, and so you should really start Spell Thieves most of the time. If you're playing to roam and make plays happen often, you'll rush Mobies and then go into Imperial Mandate, Dead Man's Plate, Rapid Fire Cannon, and Vigilant Wardstone. But if you're building more for the team fight, you can also pick up Lucidity Boots, Solari or Shurelya's, Dead Man's Plate, Redemption or Mikhail's, and then Vigilant Wardstone.
And that'll conclude our latest episode of Counter Picks for patch 11.9. Really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to sub so you never miss out on our meta guides and you're always in the loop of what the best picks are. Also remember to let us know what champ is your mental counter in the comments down below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our community Discord through the link in the description box below, where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be part of the community. Either way, best of luck in your upcoming games, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.